Hello everyone, and welcome back to Creepy Mr. Knight. I know many of you enjoy using these videos to help you sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it'd be fun for everyone to leave a comment, letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Now, let's get comfy, relax, and begin. Story 1. Ethan Carver wasn't the kind of hacker you'd expect to find leading a revolution. He didn't have a flashy personality, a mysterious underground lair, or an army of followers. No, Ethan was quiet, almost too quiet. He was the type who spent hours in his cluttered apartment, surrounded by monitors filled with strings of code and encrypted files, only emerging to grab a cup of black coffee or to disappear into the night for a run. As Zero Cipher, his alias in the world of underground hacking, Ethan had become a legend in cyber circles. He didn't steal information for the sake of it. He hacked for the challenge, the thrill of breaking a system so secure that it seemed impossible. Governments, corporations, and even the military had sought his skills at some point. But Ethan wasn't interested in serving anyone's agenda. He was a lone wolf, detached from the world around him, living in his own corner of cyberspace. One night, as Ethan sifted through the encrypted files of a global financial database, he came across something unexpected, a hidden code. He wasn't sure what it was at first. It just appeared like random gibberish. But to his trained eyes, something felt different about it. The way it was embedded within the financial records, the patterns that didn't quite match the usual chaos of raw data. It had purpose. Hours later, his mind raced as he pieced it together. The code wasn't a virus or a simple exploit. It was a key that could unlock the entire global financial system, a system that had enslaved billions of people in debt for centuries. Mortgages, loans, credit cards, they could all be erased with this code, rendering the current financial infrastructure obsolete. A utopia where money no longer controlled lives. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. This discovery was beyond anything he had ever seen. The idea of creating a system that could free the world from debt seemed almost too perfect. He had always resented the system, the way it controlled people's lives, how those in power manipulated the masses. But this was a dangerous tool, and once released, it would bring chaos. He didn't care about the money or the power, but the idea of freedom, true freedom from the shackles of debt, was too tempting. It felt like fate, and Ethan couldn't let it slip away. The next morning, he began preparing for what would be his greatest challenge, unlocking the full potential of the code. However, as Ethan dove deeper into the labyrinth of algorithms and encryption, he began to realize something even darker. The code was incomplete. There were layers within layers, and as he cracked open each one, it became clear that this wasn't just a tool for erasing debt. It had the potential to dismantle the entire global economy. If released recklessly, it could trigger a financial collapse that would leave millions jobless, destitute, and in chaos. The day after Ethan unlocked the full power of the code, he vanished. It was as if he had never existed. His apartment was found empty, save for the encrypted USB drive he had been working on. The drive contained everything: the code, the algorithms, and the warning. But there were no signs of struggle, no evidence that anything had gone wrong. Ethan had simply disappeared. Detective Lena Harris was assigned the case. Lena was no stranger to the world of cybercrime. In fact, she had built a reputation for cracking cases that seemed impossible. But this one was different. As she combed through the remnants of Ethan's life, his sparse digital footprint, the empty apartment, she realized that Ethan wasn't just a hacker. He was something more, a man who had unlocked a secret capable of changing the world. Her team found traces of Ethan's work, but no clues as to his whereabouts. His apartment had been meticulously cleaned, as if he knew that one day his discovery would put him in danger. But there was something else Lena couldn't ignore. As she dug deeper into the files, she discovered a pattern, a trail leading her to a man who had been close to Ethan once, Jared Kane. Jared Kane was a hacker like Ethan, but where Ethan was quiet and reserved, Jared was brash and ambitious. Their paths had crossed before, often as rivals in the hacking community, but Jared had always wanted something more: power. When Lena interviewed him, he seemed almost too eager to help. "I know Ethan. I know his work," he said, his eyes gleaming with an unreadable expression. "If he found something that big, trust me, it's worth finding." But there was something off about Jared. Lena's instincts told her that Jared knew more than he was letting on. He claimed to want to stop the chaos Ethan's code could cause, but there was a glint of something darker behind his words. While Lena investigated, Sophie Liu, an ambitious financial analyst working for a powerful investment firm, stumbled across Ethan's code. She had been looking into anomalies in the market, patterns that didn't quite fit, and when she came across the encrypted files, she couldn't resist the temptation to investigate. Sophie's company had its own interests in global financial stability, and the sudden appearance of a potential tool to reset the global economy was something they'd take interest in. What Sophie didn't realize was that her curiosity would soon pull her into a whirlwind of danger. As she decrypted the first layer of the code, the significance became apparent. This was not just some hacker's work. This was something much larger. The code could wipe out the global financial system, freeing people from their debts. But the more Sophie dug, the more she realized that there were layers to the code that could destroy far more than just the banks. It could obliterate everything. As Sophie became more entwined in the mystery, her company started to take notice of her findings, and they weren't happy about it. She received anonymous threats, subtle at first, warning her to stop digging. But Sophie couldn't stop. The idea of erasing global debt, of fixing the system that had oppressed so many, was too powerful to ignore. One night, after decrypting a particularly crucial part of the code, Sophie received an encrypted message. "You have no idea what you're about to unleash." It was from Zero Cipher, Ethan. But how? Was he alive? Had he left a trail for Sophie to follow? Her mind raced as she realized that the stakes had risen higher than she could have imagined. With Lena Harris, Jared Kane, and Sophie Liu now all tangled in the web of Ethan's discovery, the race to find him and the code intensifies. Lena, following a trail of breadcrumbs, stumbles upon a hidden data archive that Ethan had left behind. It was a small hint, but it was enough to lead her to a remote facility outside the city, a place where Ethan had once hidden himself during a brief period of isolation. Inside, Lena finds more than she bargained for. It's clear that Ethan had anticipated this search, that he had planned for someone to eventually find him. But there's no sign of Ethan. Instead, there's a note, a final message left for whoever finds it. The code isn't just about debt. It's a mirror, a reflection of a world that's been broken for too long. You can't fix it without breaking everything. Proceed carefully. At the same time, Jared and Sophie are racing against their own personal goals. Jared is obsessed with the idea of using the code to gain control of the financial world. Sophie, still clinging to the hope of a better world, realizes that if the code falls into the wrong hands, it could be disastrous. But who are the wrong hands? Jared? The shadowy figures behind her company? Each of them finds themselves at a crossroads, unsure of who to trust. Their personal stakes, ambition, greed, ideals, clash, and the world hangs in the balance. As the pieces fall into place, Lena, Jared, and Sophie discover the last part of the code. It's the key to activating the system, but it comes at a cost. They must decide whether to destroy it, keep it hidden, or release it to the world. The global economy begins to show signs of instability. Massive fluctuations in stock prices, banks in turmoil, chaos in the markets. Time is running out, and the question remains: what will they do with Ethan's discovery? In a final confrontation, the truth about Ethan's disappearance is revealed. He knew what would happen if the code were released, and he sacrificed himself to protect the world from its potential destruction. But now, the power of his discovery is up for grabs. As Lena, Jared, and Sophie face off in a high-stakes standoff, the consequences of their choices will determine the future of the world. And as the final moment approaches, the question lingers: can they undo what's been set in motion before it's too late? Victor Carmichael stood at the pinnacle of success, a living embodiment of Silicon Valley's highest ideals. The tech mogul had amassed an unimaginable fortune by developing cutting-edge software, revolutionizing industries, and building an empire that touched every part of the globe. His face adorned magazine covers. His name was synonymous with brilliance, and his ventures were the envy of his peers. Yet, behind the polished veneer of a self-made billionaire, there was a darkness, an insatiable hunger for more. He thrived on risk, on pushing the boundaries of what was possible, and he never hesitated to stake his entire fortune when the odds were in his favor. But tonight was different. This wasn't just any gamble. This was Victor's final bet. He had invited a select group of players to his penthouse suite on the 60th floor of his luxury building, a space that overlooked the dazzling skyline of New York City. These weren't ordinary poker players. This was an exclusive group of individuals, each more dangerous than the last, a mix of politicians, former spies, and criminal masterminds whose fortunes were as mysterious as their pasts. They had all been handpicked by Victor for this one last game. Victor didn't see it as a game of chance. No, for him, this was a battle of will, a test of who could control the future. The winner would walk away with a massive fortune, and perhaps a legacy that would be etched into history. "Gentlemen and lady," Victor announced, his voice steady as he addressed the room. "Tonight is not just about money. This is a matter of legacy, of power. The game will be simple, but the stakes, well, let's just say they're not what they appear." The players sat around the large poker table, each wearing expressions of cool calculation. They knew this wasn't the typical high-stakes poker game. This was personal. And they knew that for Victor, it wasn't just about winning. It was about controlling the future. The game began, each hand growing more tense as the minutes passed. The table was filled with the shuffle of cards, the clink of chips, and the occasional murmurs of conversation. But Victor's eyes never left the game. He was focused, determined to win. The odds were heavy against him. He was putting everything on the line, but he had never been one to shy away from a challenge. As the game stretched into the early hours of the morning, the stakes reached new heights. Players folded, but Victor remained, pushing all his chips forward. He had made up his mind. This was his final act, a gamble he would either win or lose. Then came the last hand. "I'm all in," Victor said, his voice unwavering. The other players hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. Some seemed concerned, others curious. But none could resist the allure of a bet that large, and so they followed suit. As the final cards were revealed, Victor's eyes gleamed. He had won. The fortune was his. A new chapter was on the horizon. But it was too late. Victor Carmichael was dead. Hours later, the police were called to the scene when a neighbor, concerned by the silence that followed the game, contacted authorities. They arrived to find a chilling scene. Victor's body slumped in his chair, a bullet wound to the back of his head. His expression was frozen in shock, his once vibrant eyes now staring lifelessly at the poker table. The game was still in progress when the officers arrived, but there were no players left in the room. The poker chips remained stacked neatly on the table, as if the night had just paused, frozen in time. Only a single gleaming silver poker chip remained on the floor beside Victor's body. Detective Emma Taylor was the first to arrive at the crime scene. She had been called in for her sharp instincts and unyielding drive to uncover the truth, qualities that had earned her a reputation as one of the best in the NYPD. As she entered the penthouse, she surveyed the room, her keen eyes catching every detail. The sleek furniture, the glass windows offering a stunning view of the city skyline. It was all so perfect, so pristine. But the perfection was shattered by the blood-stained carpet beneath Victor's body. Emma stepped forward, careful not to disturb the scene. She glanced at the poker table, noting the absence of the other players. "Who was here?" she asked one of the uniformed officers. "And where did they go?" The officer hesitated. "No sign of forced entry, detective. The penthouse was locked from the inside. The players, they've disappeared." Emma's frown deepened. It didn't add up. The world knew who Victor Carmichael was. He had enemies, but this felt like something more, something planned, not an impulsive act of violence. "I need everything on this," Emma ordered. "Names, backgrounds, everything. And find out who that poker chip belongs to. Someone's going to want to clean up their mess." Emma spent the following days delving into Victor's life. What she found was a man whose ambition knew no bounds, a tech genius whose innovations had transformed entire industries, but who had also made powerful enemies along the way. Victor's business partner, Martin Hale, was the first person she interviewed. Hale was a former poker champion, known for his high-stakes games and ruthless financial maneuvers. He had been involved in every major venture that Victor had started, and there were rumors of a falling out between the two. "We had our differences," Hale said when Emma met him in his upscale office, but there was an underlying bitterness in his voice. Victor was never satisfied. He was always chasing the next big thing, the next rush. But this game, it wasn't about money. He always had an agenda. Emma sat back, studying Hale's face carefully. There was something off about his demeanor, but she couldn't put her finger on it. "And you didn't kill him?" she asked flatly. Hale's eyes darkened. "I didn't need to. If I wanted him out, I could have bought him out. I could have crushed him without lifting a finger." But Emma wasn't convinced. There was too much animosity in Hale's words, too much animosity beneath the surface. Hale might not have pulled the trigger, but it was clear he had a stake in Victor's death. The next person Emma visited was Rachel Morgan, Victor's personal assistant. Rachel had been with Victor for years, seemingly as loyal as they came, but something about her didn't sit right. Her composure was flawless, but the nervous energy radiating from her told Emma otherwise. Rachel spoke of Victor as a brilliant, demanding man. He was a genius, but he had demons, things he didn't want anyone to know. I don't know everything, but I knew more than anyone else. He trusted me. Rachel stopped herself abruptly, her eyes flickering to the door, as if she feared someone might overhear. Emma leaned forward, sensing the tension in the room. "You know something," Emma said. "Tell me." You owe him that much, don't you? Rachel hesitated, then lowered her voice. There were things he kept hidden, things I didn't understand. Secrets. Dangerous ones. Just then, Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face drained of color. I have to go, she stammered. I'm sorry. This isn't a good time. But Emma wasn't going to let her off so easily. She stood up, her instincts telling her to follow. As Rachel hurried out, Emma caught a glimpse of a name on her phone screen. Lucas Byrne. That name meant something. Emma had heard it whispered in dark corners of the criminal world. Lucas Byrne was a former CIA operative, now known for his murky dealings in the global underworld. Emma's investigation into the missing players led her to Lucas Byrne. She found him in a rundown apartment in the depths of Brooklyn, a far cry from the polished image of a former elite operative. Byrne had been a ghost for years, vanishing after his days in the CIA ended in scandal. When Emma confronted him, Byrne was nervous, his hands shaking. I didn't kill him, he said quickly. I didn't even know he was going to be there, but I know who did. His confession sent a chill down Emma's spine. The more Emma dug, the more she realized that Victor Carmichael's empire was built on a web of secrets. Secrets that extended far beyond the digital world he had conquered. His technological advancements, his companies, the deals he made, all of it was tied together in a way that suggested something far more sinister than just a simple case of corporate rivalry. Lucas Byrne had agreed to meet with Emma under one condition, that she wouldn't bring the police. It's too dangerous, he had warned. You're not going to like what you find. Emma agreed. She had no choice. If she wanted the truth, she would have to play by his rules. They met at an underground club, a place that seemed out of place in the middle of New York. It was dark, the kind of place where shadows seemed to swallow you whole. Lucas had chosen it for its anonymity. You're in deeper than you think, Lucas said, his voice hoarse as he leaned in closer. His eyes darted around the room, ensuring they weren't being watched. Victor wasn't just a tech mogul. He was part of something much bigger, something dangerous. Emma listened intently, her mind racing to put the pieces together. She had suspected that there were hidden layers to Victor's life, but she hadn't expected this. Lucas continued. Victor was playing a game of high stakes, and not just with money. He was after global control. He'd been working with some of the most powerful figures in the world. Criminal syndicates, government officials, and corporate titans. They were all connected. And the game he was playing, the poker game, was only the beginning. Emma's heart skipped a beat. You're saying this wasn't about money? Exactly, Lucas said. This was about something far more valuable. It was about control. The stakes were so high because it wasn't just his empire on the line. It was the future of the global financial system itself. Whoever controlled Victor's wealth controlled the future of technology, information, and power. Emma was silent for a long moment, processing everything Lucas had said. If it was true, then Victor's death was just a small piece of a far greater puzzle. And the other players, the ones who had disappeared, were a part of that puzzle. What happened that night? Emma asked quietly, feeling the weight of the investigation bearing down on her. Lucas leaned back, his expression grim. Victor had something they wanted, something he was going to reveal. But when he went all in at that poker table, he sealed his fate. Someone in that room couldn't let him walk away with it. Emma's mind churned with the possibilities. The poker game hadn't just been a high-stakes game of cards. It had been a high-stakes battle for control over something much greater. But what was it that Victor had that was so valuable? What secret had he been holding back? one so powerful that someone was willing to kill to keep it hidden. She knew she needed to find the other players, those who had disappeared after the game. But finding them wouldn't be easy. These were people who operated in the shadows, people with power and influence that could erase their tracks with a snap of their fingers. Emma's next lead took her to a woman named Elena Volkov. Elena was one of the most powerful businesswomen in the world, a tech magnate who had ties to the Russian mafia and several other criminal syndicates. Elena had been one of the players in the game, and her involvement with Victor Carmichael was well known in the circles of power. But her connection to the game and to Victor's death remained a mystery. Emma tracked her down to a private estate on the outskirts of the city. The mansion, surrounded by high walls and security cameras, looked more like a fortress than a home. When Emma arrived, Elena was sitting in a luxurious study, her cold, calculating eyes studying Emma as she entered. "I'm surprised to see you here," Elena said, her voice smooth and unbothered. "Most people wouldn't dare come to see me without an invitation." Emma took a seat across from her, watching her closely. "I'm not most people. I want to know about Victor Carmichael." Elena raised an eyebrow. "And why would I tell you anything about him?" "Because you were at the game," Emma said. "And because someone's dead. Someone who meant a lot to you, or at least to your interests. You had a lot to gain from his death." Elena smiled thinly. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Emma didn't back down. "Maybe not. But I do know one thing. You were willing to risk everything, even your life, just to play in that game. That means something. You were looking for something, just like the rest of them. Something Victor had." Elena's expression darkened. For a moment it seemed as though she was about to say something, but then she hesitated. "You think I killed him? Is that your assumption?" "I'm not assuming anything yet," Emma replied. "I just need answers. What was he hiding?" Elena leaned back in her chair, studying Emma with a look of amusement. Victor was always a man of secrets, but what he was really hiding wasn't something you can just find in a safe or a vault. It was something much more dangerous, and whoever killed him didn't do it for money. They did it to silence him. They wanted to make sure that no one would ever get their hands on what he knew. Emma's heart raced as the implications of Elena's words sank in. Whatever Victor had known, whatever secret he had been protecting, it was big. Bigger than money, bigger than power. And it was now the most dangerous thing in the world. The deeper Emma delved, the more the walls seemed to close in around her. Someone was playing a game, one that she had only just begun to understand. Each clue she uncovered led her to more questions, more dead ends, more people who seemed to vanish into thin air when they were no longer useful. Emma started to feel the weight of the conspiracy bearing down on her. She was just one step behind whoever was pulling the strings. And the closer she got, the more dangerous things became. She wasn't just investigating a murder. She was uncovering a global conspiracy, one that could reshape the very foundation of the world's financial and political systems. As Emma connected the dots, she realized the scale of what she was dealing with. People were willing to kill to protect this secret. Powerful people. And she was now a part of their game. Emma's next move was to confront Rachel again. She knew Rachel had more information, and Emma wasn't going to let her slip away. When she arrived at Rachel's apartment, she was met with an empty space, the door ajar. Inside, the apartment was dark, disheveled, as if Rachel had left in a hurry. Emma's heart sank as she stepped inside, her instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. A quick search of the room revealed a single document, an encrypted file on Rachel's laptop. When Emma opened it, the name Project Phoenix appeared. The document was a blueprint, a plan for a technological device unlike anything Emma had ever seen. It was a project Victor had been working on in secret, one that could potentially change the world. The document detailed an artificial intelligence system designed to control global financial markets, to predict and manipulate the movements of entire economies with surgical precision. It was the ultimate weapon. Victor had been on the verge of completing it, and that was why someone had killed him. Whoever had taken the game from him wasn't after money. They were after control of the world's economies, of the very forces that governed the lives of millions. And now, the race was on. Whoever had killed Victor wanted that technology, and they would stop at nothing to ensure it was never exposed. Emma's phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You're in over your head, detective. Stay away from this." The final piece had fallen into place, but now Emma was caught in a deadly game of cat and mouse. The stakes had never been higher. Emma's world was closing in around her. The truth was now clear. Victor had been killed because he was on the verge of revealing a world-altering secret, one that could change everything. And she was the only one who knew it. In a final confrontation, Emma faced off with the people behind the conspiracy, a group of powerful figures who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. The lines between justice, revenge, and survival blurred as Emma uncovered the true mastermind, a person she never could have predicted. The showdown was inevitable. The game was no longer about money or power. It was about survival. And as Emma walked into the heart of the conspiracy, she knew that this was the moment that would define everything. She wasn't just solving a murder anymore. She was fighting for her life and for the future of the world. The world would never be the same again. Emma had uncovered the truth, but at great cost. She had lost friends, allies, and nearly her own life. Yet, she had exposed the global conspiracy that had been hidden in the shadows for decades. But the game was far from over. As she looked out over the city from her office, Emma knew that the stakes had only grown higher. The game had changed, and there were new players on the board. And with those players came new dangers, ones that would require everything she had learned to survive. The billionaire's last gamble was just the beginning. The night was quiet, except for the hum of the computer fan in Ethan Carver's dimly lit apartment. He had been staring at the screen for hours, analyzing lines of encrypted code, when something unusual appeared. A flashing sequence of characters buried deep within the coding of one of the world's most secure financial institutions. Ethan, known in the hacker world by his alias Zero Cipher, had seen it all. For years, he had cracked codes, breached the best firewalls, and stolen data that could ruin nations. But this was different. This wasn't just another puzzle. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary bug, something minor left behind by a programmer. But Ethan's gut told him this was intentional, and curiosity pushed him further. He dug deeper, isolating the encrypted string and running it through his personal decryption tools. For 2 weeks, he worked tirelessly, consumed by the puzzle until finally, he unlocked it. The code wasn't just any encryption. It was a set of instructions, a program that had the power to manipulate financial transactions, erase debts, and bypass every known security system. More disturbingly, it seemed to be a program that could bring down financial systems and topple the world's most powerful institutions. This was a code capable of rewriting the global economic order with a single line of execution. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his heart racing. He understood its potential too well. This was more than just a hacker's dream. It could change everything. It could end the power of banks, erase the debts of millions, and disrupt the foundations of modern finance. But with that kind of power came an unimaginable cost. Before he could even process what he had found, his screen blinked, the faintest hint of a warning flashing in the corner. It was a threat. Someone had detected his intrusion. The realization hit him like a slap in the face. He wasn't alone anymore. Whoever created the code, and whoever had been looking for it, was now aware of him. In a panic, Ethan wiped his laptop clean and encrypted the files onto a USB drive. There was no time to think. He knew what he had to do next. He had to disappear. By the time the authorities got involved, Ethan Carver was gone. The man who had spent years anonymously infiltrating some of the world's most secure systems was now a ghost. His apartment, once filled with the hum of his work, was empty. His clothes, his computers, everything had been erased. No traces, no signs of struggle, no hints of where he went. The USB drive containing the encrypted files was the only clue left behind. At first, the police didn't think much of it, but soon they realized this wasn't an ordinary case. This was something much bigger, something that threatened to change the financial system itself. Detective Claire Foster was assigned the case. As a seasoned investigator specializing in cybercrime, Claire was no stranger to high-profile cases, but this one was different. This wasn't just another missing persons case. Ethan's disappearance had to be tied to the discovery of something far more dangerous. When Claire first laid eyes on the USB drive, she knew something was off. The encryption was unlike anything she had encountered before. It wasn't just a simple cipher or hack. Whoever created this had thought through every possible countermeasure. The files were locked behind multiple layers of encryption, and after several weeks of trying to crack them, Claire's team was left with no answers. Whoever had hidden these files didn't want them found. As weeks turned into months, Claire's investigation began to unravel a disturbing web of connections. Ethan Carver was no mere hacker. He had ties to a network of underground tech experts, rival hackers, and even corporate elites. The deeper she dug, the more she realized the potential ramifications of what Ethan had discovered. Her investigation led her to a man named Jackson Rook. Rook was infamous in the cybercrime world, a hacker who had orchestrated some of the most sophisticated financial heists ever seen. But he wasn't just a hacker. He was a kingpin with connections that stretched into the highest levels of government, banking, and technology. Rook was also obsessed with one thing: the code that Ethan had uncovered. Claire discovered that Rook had been tracking Ethan for months, hoping to get his hands on the same program. Rook had hired mercenaries and hackers, tried to bribe Ethan's friends, and even had people tailing him for weeks, all to track down this one discovery. But Ethan had vanished before Rook could find him. Claire's research pointed to a chilling conclusion. Ethan had been more than just a hacker. He had discovered something that the world wasn't ready for. And Rook wasn't the only one looking for him. Powerful elites in the banking industry, tech giants, and even government officials were now after the same prize. The investigation into Ethan's disappearance soon became a race against time. Claire realized she wasn't just hunting down a missing hacker. She was tracking down a secret so powerful it could shatter the global financial system. Claire soon found herself working alongside a shadowy figure, known only as Tyler, a former associate of Ethan's who had once been part of his inner circle. Tyler had intimate knowledge of Ethan's work and the secretive underground group he had once been involved with, a collective known as the Vanguard. The Vanguard, as Claire learned, was a radical tech organization dedicated to overthrowing the status quo of the global financial system. They believed that the world's wealth should be redistributed, that corporations had too much power, and that the very institutions controlling money were keeping the world enslaved. At first, Claire was hesitant to trust Tyler, but as she uncovered more information, she realized that Tyler wasn't working for the same people Rook was. He wasn't after the code for wealth or power. He wanted to use it to expose the corruption of the financial world, and he believed that Ethan had stumbled upon something capable of bringing down the entire system. The deeper Claire and Tyler dug, the more they realized just how high the stakes were. The code wasn't just a piece of software. It was a ticking time bomb, a tool so powerful it could destroy entire economies, end wars, and reshape the balance of power. The problem was, no one knew what would happen once the code was unleashed. As Claire worked with Tyler, it became clear that the deeper she got, the more dangerous the situation became. She wasn't just being watched anymore. She was being hunted. Someone inside her department was leaking information to Rook. Someone was working against her. One night, while Claire was working late, trying to decipher one of the remaining encrypted files from the USB drive, her apartment was broken into. Her computers were wiped clean, and her files were stolen. But this wasn't the first warning. Rook had made it clear that he wanted the code, and he would do anything to get it. Claire realized that the key to everything lay within the encrypted files. If she couldn't crack them soon, she would be powerless to stop the chain of events that were set in motion. With Tyler's help, she was able to trace the hacker who had breached her security, someone close to her, someone she had trusted. Betrayed, Claire confronted Tyler, only to find out that he had been working with Rook all along. Tyler had used her to track down the code, knowing that once it was found, the Vanguard would have no choice but to destroy it, to keep the financial system in place. It was the ultimate betrayal. Alone and on the run, Claire finally managed to decode the last of Ethan's encrypted files. The truth was even more staggering than she had imagined. The code was capable of rewriting the very foundations of the financial world. It could erase global debt, cause inflation to skyrocket, manipulate stock markets, and even destabilize governments. In the wrong hands, it would bring about economic collapse on a global scale. Ethan hadn't just discovered a piece of software. He had uncovered the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. As Claire faced the truth, she had to make an impossible choice: expose the code and risk total global chaos, or keep it hidden, ensuring that the status quo remained intact, but condemning the world to a system of inequality. The final showdown between Claire and those who wanted to control the code took place in the heart of a secretive data center, deep underground. There, Claire was forced to confront Rook one last time as he prepared to unleash the code. The lines between hero and villain blurred as Claire realized that even the people she had been working with had their own agendas. There was no right answer, no true path to justice. The world was far too broken. With seconds to spare, Claire made her decision. The code would remain hidden, buried deep in the encrypted files, where no one could use it. But the threat of its existence would forever change the balance of power in the world. As Claire walked away from the center, she knew she had made the right choice. But the cost of her decision, both personal and global, was far from over. The Mirage Casino was one of the crown jewels of the Las Vegas Strip. Its golden domes gleamed under the desert sun, casting long shadows over the gamblers, tourists, and high rollers who packed the casino floor. But for Detective Anna Marks, the glimmering exterior only hid the darker underbelly of the establishment. The night of the robbery started like any other at the Mirage. The casino buzzed with activity. Slot machines chimed, roulette wheels spun, and people laughed as they tossed dice on the craps tables. But at 3 a.m., a crackling silence fell over the casino when an alarm rang through the building. Anna had been called in to investigate the scene, and what she found was as perplexing as it was unsettling. Security footage showed 3 masked figures entering the vault. The thieves moved swiftly, bypassing the system's sophisticated security features with ease. The vault door opened without a sound, and the thieves loaded millions of dollars in cash into duffel bags. But when the security team arrived, there was no sign of the stolen money. The vault was still locked. Not a dollar was gone. Anna stood in the vault, her gaze scanning every corner. The place was pristine. No footprints, no fingerprints, no signs of a struggle. The thieves had disappeared into thin air. Her phone rang. Graham Stokes, the owner of the Mirage. She could hear the tension in his voice even before he spoke. "Detective Marks, I need answers. This cannot get out. The media will have a field day. I'll lose everything if we don't keep this under control." Anna nodded grimly. "I'm on it, Mr. Stokes. But I need to look at the footage, the logs, everything. This isn't a simple robbery." "You have 48 hours," Stokes said, before hanging up. As Anna left the vault, she found herself already grappling with the impossible nature of the crime. Whoever had orchestrated this robbery had done so with surgical precision. But why leave the vault untouched? Why steal nothing when they could have taken it all? Anna spent the next few days poring over the security footage. The casino system had captured every second of the robbery. It was clear the thieves knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't even leave a single fingerprint on the vault door. But more troubling was the fact that the casino's security chief, Lori West, had been fired just days before the heist. Anna was curious about Lori's sudden firing. West was a former Special Forces operative, and her knowledge of the casino's security system was unrivaled. No one could have bypassed the system without her knowledge or involvement. Anna's investigation led her to speak with Lori at a rundown bar on the outskirts of the city. Lori looked worn, her eyes tired but sharp. "They made me the fall guy," Lori said bluntly, pouring herself a drink. "But I didn't do this. The heist was staged to look like a robbery, but it wasn't about the money. There's something much bigger at play here." Anna was hooked. Lori had always been tough, but her tone now was different, tinged with fear. Who would do something like this? Lori glanced over her shoulder nervously. "People who have a lot to lose. People like Stokes. The Mirage isn't just a casino. It's a front for something much worse." Anna left the meeting with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. The heist was only a small part of something much darker. The following days were a blur of paperwork, interviews, and dead ends. Anna had little time to rest, as the pressure from Graham Stokes was mounting. He had made it clear that the casino's reputation was at stake, and he was desperate for answers. Anna could feel the weight of his eyes on her back every time she entered his office. His polished demeanor, however, couldn't hide the palpable desperation in his voice. "I've been in this business for decades, Detective," Stokes had told her earlier. "But if word gets out that we've been robbed without losing a dime, the investors will be up in arms. You need to find something, anything, to show this was a real crime." But the more Anna investigated, the more it became clear that there was nothing real about the crime. It wasn't a simple robbery, and it wasn't a ghost theft either. It was a carefully orchestrated illusion, designed to deceive and distract. But for what purpose? Anna focused on Lori West. Her mind kept coming back to the security chief's cryptic words at the bar. people like Stokes. A front for something much worse. What had Lori meant by that? If the robbery wasn't about money, then what was the point? Anna needed answers, and she knew Lori was hiding something. But every time Anna tried to contact her again, Lori was evasive, speaking in vague terms that didn't reveal much. Determined, Anna decided to take matters into her own hands. She dug into Lori West's past, uncovering her time in special forces and subsequent transition into private security. There were records of her work with high-profile casinos and even shadowy organizations, but it was a connection to the casino that piqued Anna's interest. A series of coded emails between Lori and a mysterious individual known only as R. The contents of the emails were encrypted, but Anna was sure that R had to be someone important, possibly someone involved with the crime. She had to find out who. Anna's lead took her to a small hacker group based out of an abandoned building in the outskirts of Las Vegas. The group, known as the Digital Ghosts, was rumored to have access to all sorts of encrypted data. One of its members, a former casino employee, had worked closely with Lori West before she was fired. Anna's plan was simple: get into the building, gain access to their systems, and decrypt the messages Lori had been exchanging. The Digital Ghosts were notorious for being paranoid, and Anna had to tread carefully. She couldn't afford to raise suspicion. As she approached the building, she was struck by the irony. The shadowy back alley feel of the place was far removed from the glitzy lights and high society of the Mirage. It was like stepping into an entirely different world. Inside, the hacker group was as disjointed as its reputation. Anna entered through the back, her steps echoing in the hallway. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the hum of computers. A few of the hackers barely looked up as Anna approached the desk of the group's leader, a scruffy man named Cyrus. His office, if it could even be called that, was littered with old tech and monitors, flickering with code. "You're the one they sent from the department, huh?" Cyrus asked, eyeing Anna carefully. "I need your help," Anna replied, her voice steady. "I'm looking for information on Lori West. There are encrypted messages between her and someone known as R. I need to decrypt them." Cyrus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Why do you think we'd help you? You cops have a habit of using people like us and then throwing us under the bus when it suits you." Anna stayed calm. "Because you want the truth, same as me. If you help me, I'll make sure your involvement stays under wraps. But if you don't, I'll have no choice but to involve the department. And I promise you, they won't be as understanding." Cyrus sighed but nodded. "Fine, but I'm not doing this for free." "Name your price," Anna said. After a tense negotiation, Cyrus agreed to help. Hours later, Anna was sitting next to him in front of a computer, watching as he worked his magic. The digital clock on the wall ticked down, every second adding more pressure to the investigation. Finally, the screen lit up with the decrypted messages. The conversation between Lori and R was chilling. "Lori West, you can't back out now. Stokes is too deep into this. The heist will create the perfect distraction." R, "You're sure they'll never catch on?" Lori West, "No one can figure out the real plan. We're too close to the end game." R, "We've been planning this for years. Stokes won't see it coming." Anna's heart raced as she read the final line. The heist was just a distraction, a smokescreen for something much bigger. The stolen money, the missing goods, the lack of any trace of the thieves. All of it was meant to pull attention away from something far more sinister. But what was the end game? And why had Lori been so involved? Anna's thoughts were interrupted by a loud bang from the hallway. Someone was coming. She quickly turned off the computer and slipped into the shadows. A moment later, the door to the office creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was Lori West. Anna froze, her hand instinctively reaching for her gun. Lori didn't seem to notice Anna at first. She was staring at the computer monitor, her expression unreadable. Anna's pulse quickened. Lori spoke softly, as if she was thinking out loud. "I didn't want to get into this. I thought it was just going to be a simple job, helping Stokes secure the casino. But things changed. It became more than I could handle. Now, we're all in it too deep." Anna slowly stepped forward. "It's over, Lori. I know about the messages. I know you've been working with someone inside. Who is R?" Lori spun around, her eyes widening for a split second, but she recovered quickly, her face hardening. "It's not that simple, Detective," Lori said, her voice strained. "The heist wasn't meant for you to understand. You don't know what they'll do if you expose this." Anna took a step closer. "Who is R, Lori? Tell me." Lori's eyes flicked toward the door. Anna saw the flash of fear in her gaze, but it was too late. A loud crash echoed from the hallway, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. More men in black suits stormed into the room, guns drawn. Anna reacted instinctively, drawing her weapon and firing in one smooth motion. But the force of the attack was overwhelming, and in the chaos, she was knocked to the ground. The situation spiraled out of control as Anna struggled to stay conscious. The attackers were relentless, but Anna was no rookie. She fought back, using every ounce of her training to outmaneuver them. Despite her best efforts, however, she found herself pinned on the floor, staring up at Lori's face. "You should have stayed out of this, Anna," Lori said coldly, her expression now full of resignation. "You'll never leave here alive." Anna's vision blurred as the adrenaline pumped through her veins, each heartbeat resonating like a drum in her ears. She barely had time to think before a pair of heavy hands shoved her face into the cold concrete floor. The taste of blood filled her mouth, and she gritted her teeth, fighting to stay conscious. Through the haze, she saw Lori standing over her, her face expressionless. But it was the men in black suits, the ones who'd barged into the room, that were the real threat. They were professionals, no hesitation, no remorse in their actions. Anna was on the verge of losing control, but a spark of defiance flared within her. She wasn't going down without a fight. With one final surge of strength, Anna twisted her body and managed to kick one of the men off her, sending him crashing into a stack of chairs. She scrambled to her feet, her gun in hand, but before she could get off a shot, another figure appeared at the door, tall, commanding, and unmistakable. "Enough," the figure said, his voice cold, authoritative. It was Graham Stokes. Stokes had always struck Anna as a man who was in complete control, but there was something different in his eyes now, something darker. His calm demeanor didn't match the chaos unfolding around them. He stood in the doorway, surveying the scene, his arms crossed and a grim look on his face. "Let her go," Stokes ordered his men. "This is getting out of hand." Lori hesitated for a moment, and the men slowly stepped back, lowering their weapons. Anna, still dazed but with her gun trained on the group, didn't let her guard down. She was in unfamiliar territory now. Stokes was no longer the charismatic billionaire with the slick suits. He was a player in something far bigger, something that threatened to destroy everything in its path. "What's going on, Stokes?" Anna demanded, her voice hoarse. "Who are these men? What is all this?" Stokes gave her a slow, deliberate smile, one that seemed rehearsed. "You've been chasing shadows, Detective. I'm afraid you've bitten off more than you can chew." Anna could feel her heart pounding in her chest. "You've been behind this the whole time, haven't you?" "I didn't orchestrate the heist," he replied calmly, his eyes glinting with amusement. "But I know who did, and I think you're going to find out soon enough." A chilling silence followed his words, and Anna's mind raced. She wasn't about to let him play her. She needed to keep pushing. "Who is R?" "What's the end game here, Stokes?" she pressed. Stokes chuckled softly. "Oh, Detective, I'm afraid you're out of your depth. You've uncovered the first layer of a much larger conspiracy. You think this is about money, don't you? Well, it's not. This is about power." Anna's pulse quickened. "Power? What are you talking about?" Before Stokes could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. More men, different men, appeared at the door, armed and ready. Anna's instincts screamed at her to act fast, but her body was still recovering from the fight. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep this up. Stokes motioned for the newcomers to enter the room. "This is where we part ways, Detective. I'm afraid your investigation ends here." Anna knew what she had to do. If she was going to get out of this alive, she had to make a move, now. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for anything she could use as a weapon, but there was nothing. Just a few broken chairs, some scattered papers, and the flickering lights overhead. Nothing that could help her escape. But then, her gaze landed on something. A small, unassuming object on the desk near her. A lighter. Anna didn't hesitate. She grabbed the lighter, flicked it on, and hurled it toward the stack of papers. The flame caught the papers quickly, and within moments, a fire began to spread. The room was plunged into chaos. "Fire!" one of the men shouted. Panic erupted as the flames spread across the desk, igniting the curtains along the walls. In the confusion, Anna made her move. She darted for the door, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew she couldn't take them all on at once. But if she could get outside, if she could just reach the alley where backup could get to her, she'd have a chance. Stokes didn't seem surprised. He stepped aside, motioning to Lori, who was still standing in the corner, silent and unreadable. "You'll regret this," Anna called back, her voice firm. "You'll all regret this." Anna's heart raced as she bolted down the hallway. She could hear the sound of footsteps behind her, but she didn't dare look back. Her gun was still in her hand, but it was a futile weapon against the force pursuing her. They were too well prepared, too well armed. She was nothing more than a pawn in their game, and they weren't going to let her escape. Just as she reached the stairwell, something struck her in the back, a sharp, searing pain that made her gasp. She stumbled forward, barely catching herself against the railing. Her breath was coming in ragged gasps as she reached for the wound, her fingers slick with blood. The shot hadn't been fatal, but it was enough to slow her down. "Don't move, Detective," a voice called from behind her. It was Stokes. She slowly turned, her gun still clutched in her hand, but her arms were trembling. The blood from the wound was seeping through her shirt, and her vision was starting to blur. The pain was intense, but Anna fought to stay focused. She couldn't afford to let them win. Not now. "I'm not going down without a fight," Anna said, though she knew it was a lie. She had no choice but to surrender for now. Stokes stepped closer, his eyes cold. "You don't understand, Detective. You never did. This was never about you." Anna gritted her teeth. Then what was it about? Stokes's lips curled into a cruel smile. "It's about control, power, and now you're going to help me maintain it." As the fire continued to rage back in the building, Anna's thoughts scrambled. She had been too hasty, too eager to expose the truth, and now she was trapped. Stokes knew she wasn't going to stop, not now that she was so close to the truth. But he also knew she was a threat, and in the dangerous game they were all playing, threats had to be neutralized. Anna stood, bleeding and battered, her eyes locked on Stokes as he advanced, slowly, deliberately. But just as it seemed like her fate was sealed, the sound of sirens filled the air. A small glimmer of hope surged in Anna's chest. The sound of the sirens grew louder, echoing through the narrow hallways, signaling that the cavalry had arrived. But Anna wasn't sure if it was too late. Stokes's men were closing in, and with the bleeding wound in her side, her strength was waning. She needed a way out, but as she glanced around, her options were dwindling rapidly. Stokes, sensing her weakness, smirked and took another step forward, his shoes clicking ominously against the concrete floor. "You don't think you can run from this, do you?" he taunted. "You're too close to the truth, but you'll never get to finish your investigation. Not now." Despite the searing pain, Anna forced herself to stand taller, holding her gun with trembling hands. "You're wrong," she said through gritted teeth. "I've only just begun." As if on cue, the door at the far end of the hallway slammed open, and two uniformed officers from the Las Vegas Police Department rushed in, weapons drawn. Stokes's men froze in their tracks, momentarily caught off guard by the unexpected arrival. "Freeze!" one of the officers shouted. "Drop your weapons!" Stokes raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed. "I think you misunderstand, officers," he said with a mocking smile. "This situation is well beyond your pay grade." Anna's heart raced as she recognized one of the officers. It was Captain Rachel Hayes, the head of the police's organized crime division. Hayes had been on Anna's side throughout the investigation and had promised her backup. Anna's mind raced through the possibilities. Had the captain finally come to her rescue? Or was this a trap? Captain Hayes's eyes flicked toward Anna, narrowing in concern as she took in the sight of the wounded detective. Without hesitation, she barked an order at the officers. "Move in. Now." The officers quickly took action, disarming Stokes's men and handcuffing them with professional precision. Anna, still standing at the stairwell, watched as the scene unfolded in front of her. But Stokes wasn't going to go down without a fight. "You don't understand what you're walking into," Stokes warned Captain Hayes. "This is bigger than both of you." Hayes glanced at Anna, her expression hard. "I think we understand just fine, Stokes," she said. "We've been watching you for a lot longer than you think." Anna's blood ran cold. What was Hayes talking about? Had she known all along? Had she been playing her just like Stokes had? The captain's eyes flicked back to Anna. "It's over, Stokes," she said, her voice low and steady. "We've been tracking you for months. You've been running a money laundering scheme through the casino, but it doesn't stop there. You're involved in something much bigger." Stokes's facade faltered for a brief second. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "You have no idea what you're up against. The people I work with." "The people you think you work with, you mean?" Hayes interrupted, her voice cutting through him. "The ones who've been pulling your strings. They've been using you as much as you've been using them. It's all about control, Stokes, and you've lost it." Stokes's eyes flicked to the door, and for a moment, it seemed like he might try to make a run for it. But the officers were closing in, and there was nowhere for him to go. His expression shifted from defiance to resignation. "You don't know what you're dealing with," Stokes muttered bitterly. "You'll regret this, all of you." Anna, her vision blurry from the pain and exhaustion, couldn't help but wonder what had really been going on. What was Stokes truly involved in? What was the larger conspiracy he had alluded to? The question gnawed at her even as she collapsed to the ground, her strength finally giving out. She felt herself slipping into unconsciousness, the world around her growing darker and more distant. Before everything went black, She heard Hayes's voice calling out to her. "We've got you, Anna. Stay with me." When Anna finally woke, she found herself in a hospital room, the sterile white walls offering little comfort. The beeping of machines and the hum of fluorescent lights were all she could hear at first. She tried to move, but the pain from the wound in her side flared up, causing her to wince. Captain Hayes stood near the door, speaking with a doctor, but as soon as she noticed Anna stirring, she hurried over to the bed. "Take it easy, Anna," she said gently, sitting beside her. "You're safe. We've got Stokes in custody." Anna's thoughts were fuzzy, but one question dominated her mind. The heist. What was it all about? Hayes gave her a reassuring smile. "I know you've been asking yourself that for days. We've been following Stokes and his associates for months. What you uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. The robbery was a distraction, a smokescreen to cover up an even bigger operation, one that could bring down major financial institutions around the world." Anna's eyes widened as the pieces began to fall into place. "The code," she whispered, barely able to breathe. "The ghost code. That's what they were after, wasn't it? The one Ethan Carver found, the one that could erase debts, control the global economy." Hayes nodded. Yes. Stokes had a secret partnership with a group of rogue tech billionaires. They were trying to secure control of the most dangerous piece of software in the world, the code Ethan Carver discovered. If they had gotten their hands on it, they could have rewritten global finance. Anna blinked, trying to absorb the magnitude of what Hayes was saying. "But Ethan's dead. He disappeared." "That's the thing, Anna," Hayes said, her voice low and serious. "Ethan isn't dead. He faked his own death to keep the code out of the wrong hands. We've been tracking his movements for months now. He's alive, and he's out there somewhere, still working on a way to destroy the code before anyone can use it." Anna sat up in bed, her head spinning. "But why didn't he come to us? Why didn't he let us help him?" Hayes gave a small, grim smile. "Because Ethan knew that if he trusted anyone with the code, it would be used against him. He had to work in the shadows, just like Stokes and the others. But now that we've taken down Stokes, we can focus on finding him and the code before anyone else can." Anna took a deep breath, the weight of everything she had uncovered settling on her shoulders. "So what happens now?" "We keep digging," Hayes said. "We take down the rest of Stokes' network and continue tracking Ethan's movements. We won't stop until we've neutralized the threat, and we won't let anyone use the code for their own gain." It was over. The heist, the conspiracy, the danger, it all led to this. Anna had helped bring down one of the most dangerous players in Las Vegas, but the cost was high. She was still recovering from her wound, and the emotional toll of the investigation had left its mark. The truth had come with a heavy price, but Anna knew she had made the right choice. As the days passed, Anna began to heal, both physically and mentally. But the investigation wasn't over. She had a new mission now, finding Ethan Carver and making sure the ghost code never fell into the wrong hands. And so, as the bright lights of Las Vegas continued to flicker outside her hospital window, Anna Marks knew that her work was far from finished. The city's dark secrets still lingered, and she was determined to uncover them all, no matter where the road would take her. Detective Rachel Pierce stood in the heart of the State Trust Bank, her boots echoing on the cold marble floors. The sleek modern design of the building should have felt impressive, but today, it felt more like a tomb. She had been called in after an unimaginable crime. $50 million had vanished from one of the most secure vaults in New York City, and there wasn't a trace left behind. A layer of tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The bank's elite had been working overtime to keep the situation under wraps. The city's financial reputation was on the line, and no one wanted to see this case blow up into a scandal. But Rachel had seen enough in her years as a detective to know when something didn't add up. And this was something that didn't make sense. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders as she walked into the vault room, where the heist had supposedly occurred. The massive metal door was locked and secure, with no visible signs of tampering. Surveillance cameras lined the walls, their blinking lights casting eerie shadows. Tom Sullivan, the bank's head of security, was already inside, running a hand through his disheveled hair as he stared at the empty vault. He didn't speak immediately, as if trying to find the words. Rachel took a moment to study the security footage on one of the monitors. It showed masked figures in dark clothing walking into the vault, bypassing the advanced security system with eerie precision. The footage was clear, too clear. But what didn't make sense was the fact that no one had actually entered the vault. The video showed thieves, but no physical trace of their presence. "This doesn't make sense," Rachel muttered, rubbing her temples. "There's no breach, no entry, but the money's gone, all of it." Sullivan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes avoiding hers. "I've been reviewing the footage over and over, Detective. The system should have triggered an alarm if there was a breach, but there's nothing. The vault was secure." Rachel studied him closely. Sullivan was good at his job, but there was something off in the way he was talking. Maybe it was the stress, or maybe there was more to the story than he was letting on. Who was the last person to have access to the vault? Sullivan hesitated, then swiped at his tablet. Megan Scott, one of the junior security technicians. She had clearance to run some routine maintenance on the system, but she swears she didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Megan Scott, Rachel repeated, taking note of the name. What about Simon Walker, the former security expert who designed the system? Where is he? Sullivan's face darkened. "That's the problem, Detective. Walker disappeared just days before the heist. No one's seen him since. It's like he just vanished." Rachel frowned. Disappearances like that weren't coincidence. Walker was tied to the system's creation, and now he was gone. "We need to find him. Now." Rachel spent the next several hours combing through the data, pulling at the threads of the case. There were so many questions and few answers. Every time she thought she'd found something significant, another layer of mystery seemed to appear. Nothing fit together. It felt like a puzzle, but the pieces were missing. Later that evening, Rachel met with James Calloway, her partner. They sat across from each other in a small diner, the flickering neon lights casting a dull glow across their faces. The greasy smell of food and the hum of distant conversations surrounded them, but Rachel felt more isolated than ever. "Calloway, I need to know what's going on with this bank. There's more to it than just a heist. Someone inside is involved." James raised an eyebrow. "You think one of the bank's employees is in on it? That's a pretty bold accusation." Rachel nodded, her face hardening. "I don't think it's just an inside job. I think we're dealing with something much bigger. Corporate corruption, money laundering. This heist was a cover for something far more dangerous." James leaned back, contemplating her words. "So, we're looking at a conspiracy? I thought this was a simple case of a high-profile robbery." "It's anything but simple," Rachel replied. "The more I dig into it, the more I realize that someone is using this crime to distract us. The real target is what the vault was protecting. The money isn't just cash, it's a piece of a much larger scheme." James looked down at his coffee cup, his fingers tapping against the mug. "You think it's connected to the city's elite?" Rachel's expression tightened. "I'm not sure yet, but all signs point to it. Simon Walker wasn't just a security expert. He was involved in something far more complex, and whoever made him disappear is at the center of this. The next morning, Rachel visited the bank's security office, where Megan Scott worked. The young technician was sitting at a computer, nervously clicking through files. When Rachel walked in, Megan straightened up, her face pale. "Megan, I need you to tell me everything you know about Simon Walker," Rachel said, her voice calm but firm. Megan swallowed hard. "I've already told you. He disappeared. No one knows where he went." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "You're not telling me the whole story. I know you've been acting nervous. Something's not right." Megan fidgeted with her pen, avoiding Rachel's gaze. "I swear, I don't know anything. I didn't know he was involved in anything illegal. He was just a former employee, a consultant, really. He came in and out of the bank a lot, but I didn't know about any of this." Rachel leaned in, her voice low. "What about the backdoor entry to the vault system? Tell me everything you know about that." Megan froze. Her eyes flicked toward the door, as if she were contemplating running. "I don't know anything about that," she whispered. Rachel stood up slowly, sensing Megan was holding back. "You don't get to keep secrets from me. I need to know everything. Walker may have been involved in something much larger than we realize. The truth is, the only way out of this." Megan sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping. Okay. There's a back door in the system. It was built in as a failsafe. Only a few people knew about it. Simon Walker was one of them, but he assured us that it would never be used, that it was only there in case of a complete system failure. "Who else knew about this back door?" Rachel pressed. Megan hesitated again, then whispered, "Paul Edwards." The bank's COO, Rachel's gut churned. Paul Edwards was the one person who had a motive to hide a deeper conspiracy. He was powerful, wealthy, and his reputation was on the line. "Thank you, Megan," Rachel said, her voice tight with suspicion. "You've been very helpful." As Rachel left the security office, a sickening thought gnawed at her. The back door to the vault had been an insurance policy for someone with power, and that person was likely at the center of the crime. Rachel's investigation soon took her deep into the world of corporate politics, money laundering, and shady dealings. As she dug into Paul Edwards' history, she uncovered troubling connections to international banking networks, shell companies, and high-profile criminals who had used the bank's services to launder millions of dollars. The more Rachel uncovered, the more she realized that Simon Walker's disappearance was not just a coincidence. He had been a key player in a much larger game. The money from the heist, the hidden accounts, the mysterious backdoor access, it was all part of a carefully orchestrated scheme that stretched far beyond the walls of State Trust Bank. Rachel spent weeks chasing leads, following a trail of false documents and carefully crafted lies. She reached out to informants who had worked in the shadows of New York's financial world, but each piece of the puzzle led her deeper into danger. Powerful individuals began to take notice of her investigation, and warnings, veiled threats, started to appear at every turn. One night, as Rachel sat in her apartment going over the case files, her phone rang. It was an unlisted number. "Detective Pierce," a deep voice said on the other end. "You're getting too close. Stop digging into things you don't understand." Rachel's heart raced. She recognized the voice. Someone high up. Someone with everything to lose. But who? The line went dead. The phone call was just the beginning of what Rachel could only describe as a descent into a tangled web of deceit and danger. The more she unraveled, the more certain she became that this wasn't just about a robbery. This was about power. Hidden power. The kind that could bring the city to its knees. The next day, Rachel and James sat at their usual spot in the diner, the same greasy table where they had discussed the case just days before. But today, something felt different. The air was thick with the weight of impending danger. Rachel had spent the last few days chasing leads through underground financial circles, meeting with anonymous sources who fed her cryptic information about state trust banks' involvement with criminal organizations around the world. James, I'm telling you, there's more to this bank than anyone's willing to admit, Rachel said, her voice low and urgent. Walker's disappearance wasn't random. He knew something. He was the key to everything. James took a long sip of coffee, eyes scanning the bustling street outside. But why take the money? Why make it look like a heist and then leave no trace? If this is all about laundering money, the cash itself should have been a part of the operation. Rachel slammed her fist down on the table, her frustration building. That's just it. The money was never meant to be stolen. The heist was a distraction. The money was a cover-up. Whoever's behind this needed us to focus on the wrong thing, so they could complete their real mission. James leaned in, his expression shifting. What mission? I think they're setting up a fall guy, Rachel said, her voice growing darker. Someone has planned this whole thing from the beginning. It's all orchestrated to take down the bank and shift the blame onto someone else. Before James could respond, Rachel's phone rang. She quickly answered, her breath catching in her chest when she heard the familiar voice. It's time to stop, Detective. You're running out of time. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Paul Edwards, the bank's COO. The same man she'd suspected all along. Edwards, Rachel said, her tone icy. What are you involved in? There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a cold chuckle. You're starting to understand, but it's too late now. You should have stayed out of it, Rachel. You've made a mistake. Before Rachel could respond, the line went dead. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't need to hear another word. She knew this was no longer just about a heist. It was about a conspiracy that could tear apart the city's financial institutions. And if she didn't act fast, it could bring down everything she held dear. The walls were closing in. Rachel could feel it with every step she took. She knew Edwards was involved in something far bigger than just the bank's operations. But what exactly? And how deep did the corruption run? She had one lead left, Simon Walker. If she could find him, he would be the key to everything. But with each passing day, the trail grew colder. Walker had disappeared without a trace, and now even his closest contacts were nowhere to be found. Rachel visited the bank's records room, poring through documents, searching for any clue that might lead her to the missing security expert. Hours passed. She was about to give up when she found something strange, a series of encrypted files in the system. They didn't belong to any of the bank's employees, yet they were flagged as top priority. The files contained a string of international transactions and corporate deals that spanned across the globe, from shell companies in the Cayman Islands to shady business dealings in Eastern Europe. This wasn't just money laundering. This was global-scale corruption. Rachel's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she tried to decrypt the files. She was close, but she could feel the weight of someone watching her. Then the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed behind her. She whipped around. "James," she said, her voice tense. "You scared me." James stepped into the room, his face pale. "Rachel, you need to stop. This is bigger than both of us. You're getting too close. We're dealing with people who have the power to destroy us. The bank, Edwards. They'll do anything to protect themselves." Rachel's gaze softened, but her resolve remained firm. "I can't stop now. If we back down, they win." We're too far in, and if we don't expose them, they'll keep operating like nothing ever happened." "Then what?" James asked, his voice low. "What happens next?" Rachel stood tall, staring at the encrypted files on the screen. "We expose them. We go public with what we've found. If we don't, the conspiracy will keep growing, and no one will be safe." As Rachel went through the files, a new detail caught her eye. A transaction involving a mysterious offshore account connected to Simon Walker's last known location. The account was directly tied to a powerful figure in the financial world, none other than Graham Stokes, the owner of State Trust Bank. Rachel froze. Edwards wasn't the only person involved in the conspiracy. Stokes had orchestrated the entire scheme. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but now Rachel had to act fast. Edwards and Stokes had been working together, using the bank as a front for laundering massive amounts of money. And Simon Walker, he had been the person to design the vault security system, and in doing so, had inadvertently discovered the conspiracy. That's why they made him disappear. Rachel's mind raced. She needed to confront Stokes, but she knew she had no time to waste. If she didn't move quickly, the whole operation could collapse, and she might not make it out alive. She contacted James one last time. "Meet me at the vault. We're going to confront Stokes. He's been behind everything. We have the proof." Minutes later, Rachel and James stood in front of the vault, its massive steel door looming over them. They weren't alone. A black car had parked outside the bank, and Stokes himself stepped out. His face was cold, calculating. "So, Detective," Stokes said, his voice icy, "you think you've won? You think you can expose me? You're already too late." Rachel didn't flinch. "You've been running this game for years, Stokes. The people you've hurt, the lives you've ruined. It ends now." The tension in the air was palpable. Rachel reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the encrypted files, holding them up for Stokes to see. "This is your downfall. It's all here. The money laundering, the false accounts, everything you've been hiding." Stokes's smile faded. "You don't know what you're dealing with. If you expose this, you'll have no future. You and your partner will be destroyed." James stepped forward, his face grim. "We're not afraid of you anymore, Stokes. You're going down." Suddenly, two armed men appeared behind Stokes. Rachel's heart raced. They were cornered. "James, get down!" Rachel shouted, pushing him out of the way, just as shots rang out. The room erupted in chaos, but Rachel had no time to think about the danger. She dove toward the security panel, smashing the glass and triggering the alarm. The sound of sirens grew louder as police officers stormed into the building. Stokes's men were arrested, and Stokes himself was taken into custody, his expression one of rage. The dust finally settled. The conspiracy was exposed, and the people behind the corruption were brought to justice. State Trust Bank was temporarily shut down for investigations, and countless criminals were arrested, their operations exposed. Rachel stood on the steps of the courthouse, watching as the media swarmed the scene. The case had been resolved, but at what cost? "Rachel," James said, walking up beside her, "you did it. You stopped them." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She was lost in thought, thinking about the lives ruined by the conspiracy, the people who had trusted the system that was now shattered. "I stopped them," she said softly, "but there's always more work to be done." And as she looked out over the city, she knew her fight for justice wasn't over. It had only just begun. The true mastermind behind the heist and the conspiracy was revealed, and Rachel had made a decision that had changed the course of her life. But she knew that in a city like New York, there would always be another case, another heist, Another conspiracy. For now, though, she had won, and that was enough.